So Rabbi Mordecai is here, and it's one thing to look at the Torah and read the Torah and say, "Hey, wow, what an amazing story! Wow, that. Wow, it was heart wrenching. Wow, this was expanded my imagination. Whatever you want to say. Okay, very good. But it's another thing to see the Torah as a guiding light for us, like every single day, and not just say from a moral and ethical level, but just our ways of being able to understand reality, right? And one of the biggest challenges we have, especially like in Western society, is this seductive quality of materialism, because materialism is powerful because it's connected to instant gratification, right? Like we have this aspect of our consciousness that, at the end of the day, all human beings, we're all connected to Adam, right? The first man. We're all connected to Adam, the first man. And, there were certain things that happened in the Garden of Eden that you would have to argue and say, well, if we're all connected to Adam, there's an aspect of there's an aspect of that genetic experience that is inside of me, right? Everything from the greatness of Adam all the way to the fall of Adam and his ability to come back again after that fall. That all that is inside of us, right? It's part of who we are as all human beings. We can look at each other if you're in a subway or wherever you're at, and there's just all types of people. You can look at every one of those people and say they have the genetic makeup of Adam, and that's why they're alive today. And so because of that, because of the Torah, I can look into the life of Adam and I could see these aspects that we're all struggling with, right? And our progression in our lives, right? You talk to people who are like older people, like in their like elderly years, and they'll tell you about the different ups and downs that they've had in life, all following the system of Adam, right? Because we could just have a certain type of a life. But the point is just saying in the Garden of Eden, there was this concept of a thought manifestation, meaning that Adam was so connected that everything he thought, everything he desired, Hashem provided for him, right? Everything, knowledge, everything, anything he desired to quench his desires, he had access to it. He lived in paradise, as they would call it, right? That's what he lived in, that reality, right? And so this idea where this experience of instant that's where he existed at after he fell from the Garden of Eden. After he fell from the Garden of Eden, that's when the whole idea of processes came to manifestation, right? The process that there has to be so many steps, like hamotzi, there has to be 10 steps, right? To allow us to have this bread that used to just grow from trees, right? According to our Midrashim, according to the Kabbalah, right? The bread used to grow from trees, but after the fall, the trees were cursed as well. And this dynamic of now bread was a byproduct of all these different processes in order for us to eat it. That's just a microcosm of everything in reality from that point on. Everything in that reality was stages. Everything was in concealment. Everything was in a process. As we're in the initial aspect of man, it was instant. So perhaps we could say that there's a part of us that wants to go back to that place, and we want to negate the idea of processes and structures and systems in order to manifest properly, right? So we want that. We want that instant gratification. So materialism, it gives us that. It gives us that. If I want to feel honor, you know what? I could just put on a certain outfit. And people like say, wow, that outfit costs, $100,000, all together. And the jewelry you're wearing is $500,000. You are so successful. You're so accomplished. You must be so close to God, right? Because God gives you this prosperity. So you must be so close to God by what that's really, if you think about it, when someone is successful and they're making money or they achieve riches, we have that Roman colonious understanding of success and greatness with these huge cathedrals and these big buildings and big paintings and sculptures and all these other things. We've been so indoctrinated into that we perceive the person with the most amount of money as being holy. We don't admit it to ourselves. We don't admit it to ourselves. But that is really the undertone of our obsession with success and materialism. We think you must, in order to have prosperity, you must be blessed, which is true, It's 100%. But the prosperity that we speak about from the standpoint of the Torah is a prosperity of sustenance. And this sustenance that we receive from God allows us to sustain all things that are good and allow the things that are not good to dissipate. Right, so it's not about the amount of money that you have. Maybe it should bless you with a certain amount of coins or whatever, because you're supposed to give so much charity, right? Because you need to give that charity in order to fix and correct your soul in a particular way. So you may get this, but the real thing that we want sustenance. We want abundance of sustenance. We want, more than we could imagine for ourselves, of course. But the main thing is we want the right things. Because often there's people who make money that the money doesn't work out good for them. It doesn't get them to where they want to go in life, right? It doesn't get them the happiness that they thought they were going to see. I mean, they have TV shows around us. People who went to Hollywood made it, and they're like, psh. You watch people who win the lottery, what happens to them? People, who made money on the stock market. They got movies about these people, right? So you're saying that it's not. That can't be the goal. That's not the holy goal. The holy goal is not to make a lot of money. No, you want to make the right amount of money to have the maximum amount of pleasure in this lifetime. That's what you want. But there's a process to get there. You can't just say, I'm going to push this button and get it. And this is the concept. This is the dynamic of materialism. This is the idea of how materialism desensitizes us to the truth of true satisfaction, true pleasure, which only comes through a process, right? So let's look at, there's two Midrashim that, I really love, that really, if you look at them a certain way, you could take them out of the context of just looking at materialism or looking at the story as something that happened, but look at it as how Hashem is showing us a context that is applicable to all of us in our lives forever, right? Because it's a social mechanism. So I love the Midrashim of when Sarah went into Mitzrayim, right? And Yosef is in Mitzrayim. Generations later, Yosef is in Mitzrayim, and Yosef is inside of Potiphar's house. Sarah is captured by captured by Pharaoh's men and brought to Pharaoh's palace. So both Yosef and Sarah, right? Both Yosef and Sarah, you could say, are in similar predicaments, right? Yosef is sold into slavery. He ends up in Potiphar's house. Abraham and Sarah end up in Egypt. The Egyptians capture Sarah and take her to Potiphar's house. I mean, not Potiphar's, but Pharaoh's house, right? In both of them, as they were inside of Egypt, like, look at this, think about this. This is so deep, I don't even have an answer for it. It's so deep, but it's something to think about it. But both of them, as they're inside of Egypt, as they enter Egypt, as they experience the Egyptian reality, their beauty is talked about. How beautiful they are and how different they are and how unique they are to the people of Egypt, right? And they were captured and fought over. Like, this is amazing. So the Midrashim say that when Sarah was speaking to her, so it says, Sarah introduces herself. She says, I am Sarah, daughter of Haran, and he is my brother, answered Sarah. This was what Abraham instructed Sarah to say, because he was afraid if the Egyptians found out that he was her husband, they would they would not hesitate to take him out, to take Sarah, right? So it was not a lie to call Abraham her brother, since Sarah was his niece, a relative, and the term may be, and they may be termed brother and sister. So it's an interesting point, right? And so Pharaoh was pleased with Sarah's answers. He sent Abraham expensive gifts, right? He sent Abraham expensive gifts. So he wants to impress Sarah. So now he's sending Abraham gifts. So Pharaoh, he sends Abraham expensive gifts like cattle, slaves, gold, silver, pearls, and drew up a marriage contract promising Sarah all the gold. So this is the thing. So you think about it. So they go in to Egypt, right? They go into the heart of materialism. So now two righteous people are forced, because of a famine, right, to leave Eretz Israel, or to leave their place of being, and they're forced to travel somewhere else, into a new place with a new set of rules and a new dynamic, and also a certain level of darkness. Now listen to this. So the Midrashim was telling us that what is the key point in this whole thing? The key point is that Sarah said exactly what Abraham told her to say, right? Told her exactly what it, because Abraham is using this super das to understand that, you know what, if the language is not correct, I could lose my life, and you'll be captured by, you know, the society with the witchcraft. You know what I'm saying? You'll be captured there, right? And the geula and everything, and nothing else is going to happen, right? Because of this whole dynamic. So he says, say this. So she listens to him. So inadverted, by her saying these words that Abraham told her to say, all of a sudden, Pharaoh gets his Haruka Kodesh now to start sending Abraham gifts and everything. And he wants to honor her, right? He wants to honor. So now they're in Gala, she's listening to him. And so all of a sudden she's listening to her husband, and so wealth starts to increase. Wealth starts to increase, right? Abraham becomes richer, he becomes with it. So imagine two people, right? Not Abraham and Sarah, you know, two other people, they go into a place, and it's a new place, and it's a new reality. And so the husband says, hey, when we go here and when we go there and we go to these places, this is what we need to say. And this is going to allow us to be able to achieve our objectives, right? What those objectives are, maybe she understood fully or maybe not. But the point is saying she said. And so at that, Abraham started acquiring wealth. So wealth starts to be acquired. And she has this relationship now with this wealth. And Abraham has this relationship with this wealth. And so now Pharaoh can be understood and looked at as not just the source of wealth, but actually the aspect of the energy intelligence of the materialism himself. The materialism himself, you know, like sometimes you see people that when they're Eretz Israel, they're really holy, they're really connected, they live their life, whatever, and they're doing all these holy things, but then they go into Hutz and they get sucked in. All of a sudden, the girl who's wearing sandals and was running around up north and camping down south, all of a sudden she's now in New York, and now she's wearing, you know, the dress from Saks Fifth Avenues and the red bottoms and the new purse and the whole thing, and she's competing for the shuddah, and that whole person, that person that she was is now gone. That pure person that was just all about the Ruknias and listening to the Rebbe Nachman Shears and going to the Chabad for bring-ins and going to all the yard sites. Now she's forgot about that person, but not Sarah Menu, not Sarah Menu. And not only that, this intelligence of materialism that the Pharaoh is representing in this scenario is now even coming to her. He wants to covet her. He wants to covet her. He says, no, you can marry me. You can marry me. You can have all the gold. All the gold. I'll give you all the gold of the future world. I'll give you silver. I'll give you servants. And he even gave her her own property, the land of Goshen. Right? This is Sarah Menu. Imagine this. You know, you hear about all the time, you hear about like, you know, I knew this guy, and, you know, he was engaged to this girl, you know, and he was engaged to her, and, you know, he was really into her, you know, nice guy, you know, and smart guy, you know, worked in the movie business, whatever. And so he joined this group. He went by this group, and it was like a group of, like people who were like into like Kabbalah and this type of things or whatever. And so he started hanging out there. And so he brought his girlfriend or his fiance at the time around. And so one thing led to another. So in this group, this guy, some wealthy guy was there, and he seduces his fiance away from him. So she broke up and she was with the guy. I don't know if she ended up getting married to him, but I remember he was really heartbroken about it. But she was seduced. Maybe there were some other underlying issues there. So I'm not blaming her, but I'm just saying there's this idea. When you see these videos where girls are out and they get seduced by some rich guy and their boyfriend's at home waiting for them, So here, this is Sarah. Sarah is there in being seduced by Pero, right? And with all the wealth, all the materialism, all the physicality, she's getting that. And you know what Sarah says? Now Sarah has no choice but to tell him the truth. I am a married woman, she informed Pharaoh. Abraham is my husband, right? And we kept it secret out of fear. Pharaoh responds, because at this point, he wants her, he wants to devour it. The Sitra Akra, the dark side, it totally wants to pull Sarah away from her destiny. And he says, that makes no difference to me. And I will nevertheless force you to become my wife. So what happens? So Sarah right now, the force of materialism, that desire to abandon that pure person that they created in Eretz Israel, that person, that dynamic is in a situation where she's has a chance of losing her destiny, losing the person she wants to become. That materialism is now demanding of her that she join into this phase. And so Sarah, what does Sarah do? She falls down before Hashem and pray the entire night, Master of the universe. That's what the Midrashim says. She says, this is Sarah's words exactly. Sarah's words exactly. So just think about how high this is right now. She's compromised. She's totally being procured by the highest level of dashmias, all the materialism. How many women out there would be loyal to their husbands if their husbands were struggling and they were going through a famine, and they go to this new place, and this new place is like riches and wealth and all these different dynamics, and the husband is just getting little presents and hearing things from this super boss who's a multi-trillionaire, and you have all the everything you could ever imagine, anything that she could ever desire, she's going to get it. How many women would stay loyal to their husband in that situation? Remember, she's coming from a family. They didn't have any money. They were broke, right? And now she's being faced to leave her husband to be with Pharaoh and have all the gold and all the riches of the world. And so she says, what did Sarah do? She fell down and she cried out. She prayed all night. And these are her words. You know that we left our homes for your sake. Abraham left with your promise that no harm will befall him. And I left with trust in you. She's saying this to Hashem, this whole thing. And so Hashem says, and this is very high level what's happening. It's very high level what's happening. And Hashem says back, I have heard your tefillah, and I swear that no harm, no evil will befall you. This is what Hashem says back, right? So a Jewish woman is in a compromised situation where she's going to potentially lose her olam haba, right? Where she's going to transgress her husband, that she's going to leave everything that matters for her and everything that makes her in the covenant and the reshus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that dynamic is on the line. And what does she do? She prays. She calls out, she cries to Hashem. And Hashem says nothing will happen. So what happens? So an angel next to you, there's a rod. So Hashem sent an angel, and this angel as a rod. And as soon as you command him, smite, he will strike Pharaoh. So now he gave her this power over an angel. Sarah gained the power over angels in this particular situation. She had the power over this angel, and she could tell this angel that when that materialism came and wanted to devour her and swallow her and take her away from her future destiny and everything that Hashem has planned for her, that she has an angel there that's on her side that's going to remove that Sitra Akra, that influence. And so Sarah commanded the angel commanded the angel. So now she has a command over the angel to strike the Pharaoh, and all of his nobles and the slaves were smitten with boils. So Sarah had command over the angels. One, she was listening to her husband. Two, she told the truth. Three, she was able to she was able to uh, call out for God when she felt compromised. And God responded back and gave her the command over angels and told her how to do this. And so now she commanded the angels. When that happened, when she received that power, she unleashed the fury on the house of the Pharaoh. And the nobles and the slaves all had boils. Everyone was suffering. The plague was so severe that even the walls of Pharaoh's palace showed symptoms of the boils. So even the walls were crying out in pain. Everything, she unleashed a wrath that we can't imagine. This is the power of Sarah Menu falling, and we're getting the instructions on how, and they said the events of this night would proceed in the future. Just as Abraham was smitten, just as the Pharaoh was smitten now on account of Abraham and Sarah, so will the Pharaoh and the Egyptians would be plagued in the future when it comes to Bnei Israel. So this is the dynamic, right? And this is the idea of what's going on. And so this materialism, let's listen to this materialism, right? Right? The Pharaoh, and the first time it says king, it says Melech, right? It doesn't say Pharaoh here, it says Melech. It says the king was forced to free Sarah. So now, through the power of her command over the angel, she was able to remove the negativity, the sitra achra, the desire for materialism away from her and regain that original purity of where she was holding at. That original purity of where she was holding at, she was able to maintain that and push it away. And then not only that, he summons Abraham and excused himself. He apologized. He apologized to Abraham. And he says to him, he says, take your wife and leave immediately. And Pharaoh knew his people well and feared that if Sarah stayed longer, that she might yet be abused. So he was looking out for them. His heart even had compassion on them. So this is how they were able to go into a very dark place and survive. So I'm going to pause here for 1 second, and I just want to get something straight. We're good. So I want to go on a little bit more, like in this idea of like really this developing this thinking process of understanding about the world that we live in today is a cosmic design. And this cosmic design has been going on over and over and over again for the sake of perfecting our neshama. So the challenges that they had thousands of years ago are the challenges that we have now, because it's a design. Maybe certain aspects look different on the exterior. Maybe they don't. Maybe their societies were even much further along than we were in technological advancement. But now we only know what we know, right? And so the idea is just to be able to do that, right? And so I want to talk about this dynamic of Yosef Asadik, right? We understood Sarah, we made the connection between Sarah and Yosef and this whole process. And the process of Sarah, it was an insight to the future situation of Bnei Israel, in terms of the same way that the Malachim came into Mitzrayim and removed Sarah, ultimately removing Sarah and Abraham with great wealth. So too that during the times of Bnei Israel, they will also be removed by the influences of Hashem and also leave with great wealth. But they had to overcome certain things. They couldn't be tempted. So here's the story of Yosef Asadik, and this is something I think we could all like connect to in a lot of ways, because this is the moment that Yosef became Yosef HaSadik according to our sages. It was at this moment that he became this chariot of the level of Yesod, this aspect of Yesod. And by the way, I know many of you guys, you Kabbalah guys who are listening to this, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, Mordecai is connecting Yesod, aspect of Yesod, and the aspect of Seramenu being Malchus and being this ultimate Kli. I know you're connecting this idea of Ze'erim Pin and Malchut by explaining Seramenu in Yosef Asadik in the Yesod and Malchut. I know you're doing it that way, but why are you going with Sarah first? Shouldn't you have went with Yosef first? No, we're going the way that we're going. Because the desire has to exist first, right? That's the whole thing of Malchus. Malchus is the desire. It's the ratzon. It's pulling in. It's constantly receiving. It's receiving. So it's desire. So Yosef is like this. So Yosef is at this point in his development where he's risen, or he rose to prominence in Potiphar's house. And he was there, and he was feeling good about himself, and he was relaxing, and so now as he's relaxing, it says when Hashem saw how comfortable Yosef was in Potiphar's house, he says, "If you consider yourself a hero, I will send the bear to attack you." Okay, and he says, "We will see if you can be victorious over this bear." Okay, that's a big concept. I don't understand like that point. The Midrash brings it, but we're rolling with it. We're rolling with it. We understand it on a very basic English level, and we could keep going. Potiphar's wife, Zuleika, right? Zuleika, this is her name. So everybody always says, Ish's Potiphar. Here, the Midrashim reveal the name, and her name is Zuleika, right? This is her name. What Zuleika means exactly, we're going to probably find out, but we're going to keep going. So it says, Zuleika could not fail to notice this young slave, his beautiful looks. This is the connection between him and Ceremony. Ceremony also by the Egyptians saw, but she was a female, this is a male. Joseph inherited the grace and the beauty of his mother, Rachel. His mother, Rachel, was considered extremely beautiful, right? And Zuleika consulted with the astrologers that determined her fate, and that the Hebrew slave determined that her fate, and that the Hebrew slave found a surprising prediction. The constellation foretold that she and Yosef would have a common descendant. So the sages say the reason why Ish's Potiphar was so obsessed with Yosef was like, not only was he beautiful, but there was an astrologer who predicted that they were going to have a future descendant. So she assumed that it would be from her, right? So she thought that this was a heavenly prediction. So she not only did she was attracted. So imagine like you have this you have this random person. Like you hear about these stalkers, right? These people like they become obsessed with these celebrities, and they just they follow them places and all. It's like a syndrome. I wonder, it'd be interesting to study it. So she has this blind attraction to Yosef. And not only that, imagine one of these stalkers went to the most respected religious person or spiritual leader that they knew of. And that spiritual leader gave them a prediction that this person that they were obsessed with, they're supposed to have a descendant together or a kid together, right? Imagine that. So this is Potiphar's wife, right? She's like obsessed, Zuleika, right? She's obsessed with Yosef, right? And she goes to a person, and she goes to some type of spiritual person, and they predict that they're supposed to have a descendant, right? We know later, obviously, because we're not going to go into everything. We know later that Yosef does marry Osnat, right? And Osnat was Dinah's daughter that was conceived in rape, and she was sent, to Egypt. It's a whole big story. There's different perspectives on it. She was sent to Egypt, and she ended up in Potiphar's house. And so eventually Yosef is going to marry her, and she's actually, comes from, the tribe of, she comes from the nation, she comes from Israel. And from there, he ends up marrying a Jewish woman, right? And so this is what the astrologer person that Zuleika, went to see. This is what he was predicting, or she, whoever it was, they were predicting that this child from Osnat will come. So that's what she had, right? So she started to try to seduce the guy, and it says Zuleika tried to draw the young slave's attention, to her, but he ignored her. She began to change her wardrobe 3 times a day, right? It's interesting, 3 times a day. We have tefillah 3 times a day. but it's interesting. So, but Yosef never even glanced her way. He shmirshed the eye, and he guarded his eyes. He learned in Yaakov's house. She attempted to bribe him. Wow, this is like Sarah Manu all over again. She attempted to bribe him with thousands of pounds of gold. Just like this, he would be an extremely wealthy man. And Yosef, he was not impressed. Just like this, it's like this genetic information we were talking about, in the beginning, us having these qualities of Adam Rishon and having this experiences of up and down and challenges and how to deal with challenges, and we're seeing this more on a micro level, right? Where we're seeing it now, like the same qualities that we see that Yosef displaying are qualities that we saw with his mother. And from his mother, we saw through his great great grandmother, right? Sarah Manu, right? Yeah, great grandmother. Yeah. So anyways, so this is the thing. So he's displaying these same qualities, and these things are passed on. The midot that we have is the midot that's going to be passed on to our kids. People talk about, I want to have a holy kid, I want to have a holy kid, I want to have a holy kid, these types of things, Siddiqis, all these types of things, these kids do this, but it's just like, it's you're passing that on over to them. How your midot is what you're giving over to your kids. What you see is a byproduct of you, right? So the best way to have righteous kids is to be a righteous person yourself, right? So anyways, so Zuleika spoke to Yosef, tempting him and threatening him day after day for 12 months. This went on for over a year. Could you imagine this? A young teenage guy, good looking. You got to realize, we got to put in context that she's considered one of the most beautiful women in the world, right? Right? She's considered one of the most beautiful women in the world. And so she, in world history, right? And so he has this young guy who's all by himself, right? Not in any type, not married, nothing, this type of thing. And so this extremely beautiful woman is coming at him and trying to just seduce him every day for over a year, right? Like to the point, like this lady was obsessed. This is the only thing that mattered to her. And the famous story, she invites her friends over, and the friends come over for tea, and she gives them out like citrus fruits and sharp knives and tepillah, which all these things have very deep meanings, by the way. And they had sharp knives to peel the fruit with, and she called Yosef in, and Yosef comes in, he appears in the doorway, and all their heads looked over, and they were so overwhelmed by their beauty, they all cut their fingers, and it was blood dripping. We did the whole big thing too, like deep stuff. So the point is like this, right? And so he's doing that, and he's experiencing that, right? And so she's expressing that, and Yosef's beauty is the same way that Ish's Potiphar is affected by his beauty. It's the same way that Sarah Manu affected all of Egypt when she was there, or the Egyptians at least that saw her. And that's the same way Yosef too. She brings her friends over. So it's not like they knew who he was, right? They came over and they were overwhelmed by this, right? And then she says to him when their hands are bleeding, she says, now you see what I'm going through. If you only saw it for a moment, I have to live with this slave every day. And he refuses to even look at me, right? This is a huge point. So now if we can say, listen to this, if we could say that Sarah Manu was being seduced by materialism and by this life of grandeur that was isolated from her covenant with her husband, which is the covenant with Hashem, she was getting seduced by this. So can we say over here that Yosef Asadik is dealing with the same thing? But his situation is sexual, right? It's sexual. This is the dynamic. Sarah Manu's things was more material. He just wanted a contract with her. He wanted her to take away her relationship from that light of Abraham and bring it and receive the light of Pharaoh. That's what she wanted. Over here, you have Yosef Asadik fighting against the aspect of himself that will be the very thing that makes him famous throughout the ages, the level of Yesod, right? That aspect of Yesod, which is a real male reproductive organ. This is what is being tempted in the situation. It wasn't the gold or the money. He didn't come out. That wasn't the challenge, right? His challenge was this dynamic of, of being seduced in a way that would damage that aspect of himself, right? So it keeps going, right? The story keeps going, and it gets more and more intense, right? And she keeps pressing him and pressing him, and this whole thing happens, right? And so what does Joseph say, right? What does Joseph say? Right? What is this discussion? What happens? What's going on in Joseph's mind when this is happening? And this is one of the great things about the Midrashim, because it opens up our ability to imagine what was going on in moments that are so important for our own development, right? And so it says like this. It says, so one day, Zukaila finally appeared. Ish's Potiphar, she appeared to have the opportunity which she's been waiting for, right? So listen to this. This is huge. This is a very big insight. It was the day when the Nile River overflowed, right? So remember this Nile River. This is a national holiday for Egypt and was a celebration of singing, dancing, and praise. Pure Avodah Zarah, super Avodah Zarah, right? Yosef would never participate in these events. So imagine, so on this day, so let's think about what let's think about what the Midrashim could be trying to explain to us. Yosef, this is a national holiday, right? This is a day of pure Avodah Zarah. The whole country is into it, right? And Yosef is separating himself in that way, right? So on this day that he's separating himself from this dynamic, this is where he receives this challenge, right? So he stays inside, he doesn't participate, he's inside of the house of Ish's Potiphar. He's doing bookkeeping. So Zuleika, she sees this and she excuses herself and says, and she stays home too. She's like, yes, he's not going to go out there. He's going to restrict. I'm going to go. This is my opportunity. She thought he'll be home alone and they'll be together for some time because everyone's going to be out, right? Everyone's going to be out celebrating. This is a holiday. This is like their Christmas, right? And so she says that she dressed herself in expensive robes and adorned those. She did everything. She got herself ready. She was ready to go. And she even burnt incense. She even affected the atmosphere, the sense in the atmosphere. And she sat down in the doorway and she knew Yosef would pass by. And when Yosef did not come, she called. She says, Yosef, why do you not go and do your work? Right? Because she stood in front of the doorway for him to go and do the work. Right? And so she was right in front of that. And so he didn't come. And so she yelled out. So Yosef appeared and passed by her. And so she stretched out her arm. Right? She stretched out her arm. It's interesting because you think about the arm that's going to stretch out and bring Moshe Rabbeinu in from Batia, right? And so that's later, right? And so so she stretches out her hand and she prevented him and said, I swear to you, if you do not fulfill my wishes, you're a dead man. So now this aspect, think about it. Imagine a guy, right? A guy who wants to be Shomer Brit. He wants to protect himself. He wants to keep this connection. He wants to keep the life force of God within him. And he's at that point where he's been keeping this mitzvah. He's been so focused on protecting and not wasting seed. And he's at this point where he's like, you know what? If you don't release this, you're gonna die. This is how a guy could justify it, right? You're gonna die. This is the body consciousness, the desire of the lower inclinations is so great that it could feel that a person is gonna die if they don't break this. Like sometimes you see people have addictions, right? They have these addictions and their body is fiending. They're fiending for it so much. in their mind, they feel they're going to die if they don't get a hit, right? And a lot of really ugly things come out. I've seen it in movies. So it says like this. So Yosef, empathetically, he refused and swore oath that he would not listen to her. So he took an oath to himself. She pressured him and said, she pressured him, but Yosef said, this is key, this is so huge. Listen to this. One of my forefathers, Abraham, was commanded to sacrifice his son. Perhaps one day I will be chosen as a sacrifice. Shall then I render myself unfit? So he says like this. So he says, Yitzhak was chosen as a korban for the whole world because he was unblemished. He had no averas. He was completely unblemished. He was perfect. He was perfect in his spiritual expression in this world. And Abraham was chosen to use him as a korban, right? Because of his perfection, right? So hypothetically, it's like he's looking at it. It's like saying that, like, if I do this, I won't be as pure. I come from a pure lineage. I come from a whole history of people, of souls that were so high that God chose them to be carbonas for the whole world. This is where I come from. You're trying to seduce me and you want me to lay with you. You're not my wife. This is outside of the Torah that was revealed at least at that time. You're not my wife. So me laying with you as a married woman, you would bring me a blemish. And so should I make myself unfit? This is what he says to her. This is what I come from. He says, also, I'm afraid that my father inherits Canaan. He says, for the slight transgression of disarranging my father's couch, Reuben lost his firstborn rights, right? She's going back in mind, like saying, like, come on, like, you don't understand what I have them on the line. I could have my own tribe. I could be in the history books forever. I have all this in front of me. And she said, and it was transferred over to me. I received this. And now you want me to lose it to you? I'm also afraid of my master. I'm afraid of Hashem. So this is what he's up against. This is what he's doing. You know what Zuleika says to him? And this is what the Yetzer Hara, this is how the Yetzer Hara communicates. If the Yetzer Hara says, don't fear. I will assassinate him. Listen to this. It tells them, don't fear. I can take you into a place where you won't remember even those things that you're talking about. I will assassinate. I will kill your father. This is what Zuleika says. And then Yosef says to her, he says, wait, then I should be a murderer, right? By forgetting about my ancestors, by cutting myself off, I'm murdering the lineage. And all the people are supposed to come behind me. I'm going to become a murderer as well as an adulterer. You're a married woman. You should want to exchange me for your husband. Why would you want to exchange me for your husband? Zuleika didn't give up. The Midrashim says she didn't give up. It was just, she kept going. No one is here now. Listen to us. No one is here. No one will know. Listen, now she's on the point of she's now attacking the perception of reality. And you know what he says? He says, I'm afraid of Hashem. You're right, Shemaim. This is what I have. And listen what she says. He's not here. He's up in heaven. This is what the evil inclination tells us and convinces us to transgress Hashem. It's right here. We're utilizing this experience of Yosef Tzaddik and Zuleika. We're understanding it in this way. We're understanding it in this way, but the bottom line is, it's like saying this is what we're going through. And so in Yosef Asadik, after she tries to convince him that the God is not in this world, it's somewhere far away, he says nothing is hidden from Hashem. This is Yosef Asadik. He's fighting for his life. And then she took, it gets even better. She took a blanket and covered the face of the idol that was in her room. And Yosef smiled and said, like, listen to this. When we are about to commit an Avera, we're going to transgress. Hashem will show us the stupidity of what we're about to do if we want to see it. If we want to see it. It will always be proof in front of us of the stupidity or the level of the madrega of the environment that I'm in. No girl should say that this guy turned out to be this crazy narcissist, crazy guy, bad guy, this, blah, 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 and she was with him for all this time and gave herself to him. And the same thing for the guy. He can't say, oh, well, she was crazy, blah, 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 blah. You saw it. Listen to this. She goes and takes the blanket while she's seducing him. So now that Yosef's talking about God, what does she do? She tries to show she's holy, and she puts a blanket over one of her gods. And Yosef smiled and said, you see, you're ashamed in front of your idol. So what should I do? Hashem's eyes are everywhere. There's nothing hiding from him. Nothing's hiding from him. Nevertheless, Zuleika didn't matter. Nevertheless, she just kept pressing him. And Yosef felt himself becoming weak. And so it doesn't matter how strong his words were, how strong his conviction, that gets a hara in your face weakens the strongest of the strongest. And he was about to give in. He was about to give in to her when a vision of his mother Rachel. So a vision of his mother came to him. His mom who passed away when he was a young boy, who never had a chance to grow up, that never was not there. And maybe in his mind, he thought, like, you know, if his mother was there and alive, nothing this would have ever happened. It wouldn't have been drama with the brothers. He wouldn't have got sold into slavery. Those things would have never happened. And so now, when he's all by himself, when he's all alone, and he's about to lose everything, all of his inheritance, everything that he has, what comes to give him strength? His mother. His mother. And we could look at it on the level of an image, but we can also look at it on the fact that that image that came to his mind, because the DNA that his mother created when she bittled herself in front of her sister by giving her sisters the signs, maybe perhaps that strength that she had to do that was a strength that was inside of the DNA of Yosef Asadik, and that vision triggered that genetic information and gave him the strength. In his mother, and he heard Yaakov say, he even had the ability to hear his father Yaakov, and Yaakov says to him, he says, there will be 12 precious gems, one for each tribe, on the Kohen Gadol's breastplate. If you sin, your place will be empty. He's saying your place in history, you're going to be remembered forever. This is the reason why the world was created, for the people who keep the Torah, the people who keep the mitzvot. This is why the Torah was created. This is the reason why the world was created. The world was created for these people to makabel the Torah and to be able to perform these mitzvot on individual levels, on a family level, and on a national level. This is what the Torah is teaching her. And so now the vision that he has as his mother is giving him strength, and his father comes to him in his voice comes to him, and his father says, you know what, if you do this, your place in history will be gone. And it's in the meaning that the Midrashim says, meaning the words of Yaakov was the Shekhinah will rest on the Chazin Mishpacha, right? It will rest on this aspect of your stone. It will be removed because Hashem hates immorality, right? This aspect of your family, of your descendants, the Shekhinah, through being one of the tribes, the Shekhinah will rest upon them, and by being removed by that, you will push Hashem away from you, because Hashem hates immorality. And he says Hashem's blood, Yosef's blood was froze, and he was disgusted, but he was in strength. He was given so much strength by this experience that literally happened in a split second, and he was able to perform a huge kiddush Hashem. and he was able, and he was at awe, and his energy completely revitalized, and he completely changed, and he became this powerful entity connected to his father's DNA and his grandfather's and his great grandfather's. He's connected to that, and so now Zuleika, she realizes that her case was lost, and so she grabbed Yosef with her hand, and with the other hand she pulled a sword from under her dress. And and they say there's a famous idea in the Zohar that says that the sword that's spoke about is a sword that severs the individual who creates immorality, right? A sexual immorality. There's a sword that comes out. I wish I would have my Zohar open. I could bring the exact point, but that idea. So she grabs a sword. She grabs a sword and from under her dress. So the whole time she had a sword underneath her dress. So you could imagine that, like, who knows? Like, this lady could be demented. Maybe the whole plan was to seduce Joseph and then kill him. Who knows? She couldn't take it anymore. He was driving her crazy. We don't know, but the point is saying the Yetzer Hara, the greed, the lust that's seducing us, is going to wipe us out at the end anyway. It's a no-win situation. No matter how good it makes it look, how rosy it is, the how seductive and how lustful and how passionate, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's like the guy who goes around and convinces everybody that he has something in his hand that's balled up, right? The guy has a balled up hand, and he convinces everybody he has this like huge, all this magic and all this power and this magical dust inside of it. And all these people start looking at him and start following around because he says there's this magical dust. But at the end, they realize that his hand was empty the whole time. And he distracted all these people, and they went on this whole new course in life because this person said that they had this magical dust that no one else could have but him or whatever. It's the same thing. The Yetzer Hara is a setup. The quick way, the easy way, the quick fix, it never works. How many successful people have taken their lives because they had all the money? And how many people have lost all their money and have also taken their lives? Both sides. So now we're learning about it in depth, and we're seeing Hashem expressing this process of sexual lust and material lust, and how that played itself out at different moments in Jewish history, and how our avos and how our ancestors, how they dealt with that, and how those challenges and the words and the thinking process was all the same. So she grabbed, in a flash, she whipped out, she slipped, Joseph slipped out of his garments. So at this point, I guess it must have been like a very thinly type of shaped guy. So as she grabs Joseph's shirt and she pulls out a sword, he slips out of the shirt. I guess it's one of those like old school type of, Egyptian things, and slips out of his garment, leaving it in her hand and running out of the door. And at that moment, he passed the challenge. That's when he became great, running away from the sin. If a person knows that they have a taiva and they know they have a weakness, they have to run away. It's not enough to just say that, like, oh, well, you know what? Oh, you know what? I could just do a little bit. It's like the people, you see people who were alcoholics or people who are drug addicts, but specifically you see, with the alcoholics, it's more of a practical thing. Once they identify that they're alcoholics and they stop, they can never drink from it again. They're not allowed to have a casual drink. That's a gateway to that terrible behavior. They have to cut it straight, turkey, nothing, not even going around it. If they know it's going to be there, they don't even go to these places. And these are people who haven't had a drop of alcohol in 10, 20 years. They won't go to a place if it has that dynamic there. This is the concept of running away from the taiva. Running away from the taiva. But for us, it's not the issue of drinking as Jews. It's the issue of how we eat, how we deal with our purity, how we deal with things like tuma, right? How we deal with impurities, how we run away from those things, how we keep ourselves away from that, how we keep ourselves away from things that are going to give us potentially negative thoughts, impure thoughts. impure, dynamics around us, like being able to run away from that. It says the person who runs away from kavod chases them, right? It's the opposite dynamic. The things that we want come from running away from our lower desires. And this is what this thing is about. And this is the dynamic. In the dynamic of protecting our sexual morality as men is so important as it is for the woman to protect herself from the illusions of materialism. A proper Jewish woman is not necessarily, thinking about, having an affair with her husband and losing her olam haba and burning forever, right? That's not really like her goal. She'll get a divorce and move on. So the dynamic is from the sake of being drawn in by the illusion of materialism, losing the understanding that what makes you important and significant in a society is your wisdom, is your ability to see through the material world, to see through Pharaoh's promises and all the things that Pharaoh said he was going to provide to you. And I'm not talking about the Pharaoh 4,000 years ago. I'm talking about the Pharaoh today, the Pharaoh that is on television, that's constantly telling you and showing you images and saying, if you don't look like this, you're not beautiful. And if you don't have these clothes, you're not stylish. And if you didn't go to these schools, you're not educated. And if you're not in these environments and being validated by these particular, individuals or institutions, you're worthless, right? So that idea of looking through the lenses of anything that blocks us from only seeing Hashem, right? Only seeing our devotion to our husband, only seeing that aspect of Ze'er and Pen and Malchut, right? Abraham represented Malchut Sarah was Malchut and Abraham represented Ze'er and Pen. That light, that channel where all the brachas and all the blessings come from through that union from upper worlds and lower worlds, that union, that connection where all the bracha come, that's what Sarah Menu did not deviate from. And over here, Yosef Asadik, being in a place where God isn't as revealed and God isn't coming to him. Keep in mind that this conversation that Yosef is having is not the same conversation that Sarah's having. Sarah's having an interaction with Hashem. She was given power over Malachi. Yosef, he's by himself. He's just remembering these conversations that they had, that the Avos had with Hashem. He's remembering that. But in his place, he's in a lower level of Galus, where Hashem's light is less revealed. And so that's why that lower aspect of the Yesod is so dangerous. And so the point of this conversation is to just really think about how we can change our perception of life and a perception of reality and be able to say like, hey, you know what? How do I get to a place where I'm able to see that the desires that I have and the entities that are invoking these desires that I have that are not holy, that are not pure, that I can differentiate that from who I am as a person and understand that these experiences and these desires that I'm having are not who I am. These are things that I'm being influenced by. And the set of life scenarios makes this particular situation. Sarah is coming from a place of coming out of almost like poverty and famine in Eretz Israel, the holiness, the place that they were connected to spiritually. They were coming out of there and they go into this new place. And so now she's being offered all the riches in the world. And she doesn't deviate one bit from what her husband, the Midrashim make a specific point to say that she reiterated what Abraham said, showing us that she did not deviate from her relationship from her husband, from that channel of light that had that in the midst of being offered all the materialism, given the ability to abandon her purity, being able to abandon that. And so this is something that all of Bas Israel, all of Bas Sarah, all the neshamot that are connected to Sarah, specifically those women, they have to think that they know that they have that power to look through the materialism, to see all the girls that are wearing the Gucci and the Chanel and the Prada and all this and say like, hey, I understand how that looks. I understand how it's portrayed, but that's not where it's at. That's not where it's at. And in fact, the light that they want to connect to, the light that's going to attract the perfect shidduch, the light that's going to bring their husband closer to her, the light that's going to make everyone see her in a different way is having that energy that allows her to look through the promises of the Pharaoh, And through looking through the promises of the Pharaoh says, you now, or I serve you. You get to keep everything that I offered you, and you can utilize it for you and your husband's holy adventure. And so that dynamic of the Malchus now serving the righteous is where we're going to. And then over here with Yosef, that those moments and those times in our life where we have those instances, right? Those instances that it may go on for over a year, where a particular taiva, and we get to a point where we feel like we're going to die, and we just got to release ourselves, and we just got to let go. And if we don't go anymore, we can't just take it. We're going to go insane. From that place, this is Yosef Asadic. And are we able to even look at our own physical desires, right? We're talking about Sarameno, exterior. Yosef Asadic is dealing with this internal aspect, right? Because he's a channel of light. And so this channel of light that Yosef Asadic is, if he blemishes that, that's the whole world. The channel for the whole world, that light does not come down in a pure way into Malchus. It doesn't. It doesn't come down that way anymore. And so Yosef, the whole world, the channel of that light is coming down in that way. And so too, every single person is a world, right? Every person is a world to themselves. And they have all these things going on and all these things. And these worlds interact. That's what the universe is teaching us. There's all these planets, there's all these stars, there's all these asteroids, there's all these, universes, galaxies, planets, all the things, etc. But we have all these things, but that in that same way that every person is a world, if that world does not receive the life force of Hashem, that world becomes dark. This is the blemish of the sexual reproduction organ. This is a level of yesod. If you damage it, the world that you live in will not have the chariot, will not have the yesod, the light of the yesod that comes into your malchus, meaning as you could say, your body is like a malchus, and say that picture of water in the cold water on a hot day that you're pouring into your throat. That's the light force of the Creator, right? And so by you receiving that water, you're rejuvenated, you're reinvigorated, you have energy, you're cooled down, you're this. In that same way, that life force of God that comes down in this world and is manifest in this place of Malchut, which receives this light and then manifests it up. If your yesod is damaged, the light can't come down. And if the light can't come down, then there's no manifestation of light. And if there's no manifestation of light, there's darkness. So this is what we're working off of. We're working off of this reality, and Baruch Hashem, we have, this amazing Midrashim, all translated in English. It's actually the Midrash says, it's a book of Bereshis, actually, it's a friend of ours, we're borrowing it. They should be blessed for letting us borrow it. And, but yeah, that's where we're at, and we're working on these things, and we're working through it, and we're thinking through it, and we're building through it. And the point is saying, like, we have to be aware of that we're going to be tempted by materialism. And it's going to want us to convince us to break our relationship with the force above and the force below, because materialism will convince us to go and receive from something that does not have light on its own, right? Which is the materialism, which is the malchus. So our way of staying connected and being able to elevate it, to utilize the material for good, which we see Abraham and Sarah do as they leave, that's what we want to be at. But the way that we do that is by seeing through the illusionary promises of the materialistic world, and the beautiful Midrashim give us that ability to understand it through the situation of Sarah Menu in Pero. And so we have the same thing over here in later generations with Yosef Asadic. Like you have a whole industry based around sexuality and sex and all these different things. You have a whole industry around it, right? Do we not forget about billions, trillions are generated from utilizing sexual innuendos and thoughts and ideas. Almost like every movie has a scene that's sexing in it, like something implying intimacy between two people, right? Every song, every form of fashion, most of the news stories. You know, now they're even bringing into the schools and education. So the point is saying it's everywhere we look. And so now we have this beautiful midrash that teaches us and shows us how Yosef the Tzaddik was able to overcome this desire and become known as one of the greatest of all time. And so it's not about saying like, hey, I need to be in a situation where I was almost seduced, but I need to get away. It's like, no, it's about being able to see through the promises and the vision and the story that's told to us about expressing ourselves sexually and confusing pleasure with happiness, confusing pleasure with progression, confusing pleasure with this idea of connection, right? That's that illusion that the world is constantly trying to show us all the time. That's why we have to know that there was a parade around the Nile River, because this was the reality of perversion, of understanding where the source of light comes from. They have to it has to show you that through this thing. And Yosef restricting to participate was showing the challenge of restricting against this false perception of pleasure, festival, parade, happiness, right? Instant gratification. You go down, you have a beer, you have some cotton candy, you know, you're having a great time, right? So he resists that. And so now he's being seduced by this woman, but really, it's really what he did was he was having a conversation where he was working out in his own mind the power of this seduction of this time that he's been spent in Egypt away from his family. And so he was able to get this powerful Haruch HaKodesh, right? This powerful divine inspiration, and was able to, from there, be able to see clearly that what was being told to him was a lie, and his principles were created. And at that point, that negative influence, which the lady literally takes out a sword to take him out, meaning that he passed the test and he didn't receive the real sword, which is a severance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a severance from the Shekhinah, and a severance from the light, and a severance from our inheritance. So should we know this? We should know only great success, and we should know that we are here to overcome our desires. We're here to utilize the Torah to see the physical world, and then be able to see this physical world and be able to look through its false promises, and even be able to look how it affects my body and my mind and my thoughts, and be able to look at that and say, wait, even though my thought may be influenced this way, and even though my body may be compelled in this way, it still doesn't change what God said. And I could even go against the desires of my body. Baruch atah Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.